Thank you, David. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Elise and David, for hosting me today, and thank you for joining us. And I understand our Australian crew has woken up and joined us. So, Lanny, hi, you've got your camera on. You'll notice if your video is off, we don't get to see your name anymore, which is, I think it's a good feature in Zoom. Anyway, I want to welcome you all here and talk to you about climate. Now, before I do that, if you could, in the chat, perhaps answer the question, what brings you here? What was it about this title of this talk that might have tweaked your interest or your curiosity to join me? There's been so many great conversations over the last 3 days. And for some of you, if you've been involved in them, you might be a little bit tired, but I'm going to ask you for just a little bit more energy to have this conversation, because I think it adds a little bit of a different dimension, or definitely an additive dimension to the great conversations and presentations that have been going on over the last 3 days. So let me start here just with my slides. And let me give you an overview of some topics and themes that I will be talking about with you over the course of this hour. First of all, definitions matter. So I've got a couple for you that, based on hearing similar topics and conversations, they sound very similar, but I'm going to place them out there for you to know where I stand in these 3 areas I want to talk a little bit more about. I am going to go deep as I can in 1 hour, that creative climate is a critical part of the ecosystem of any organization looking to bring more creativity and ultimately innovation into their place of work. And that there are actually 6 key climate dimensions that I'm going to talk about that need to be intentionally nurtured. And the word there is intention, because we are in a climate always. And like we've learned about with climate change, the weather around us, we now need to be more intentional around nurturing a climate that is healthy for all of us. And in some ways, there's very similar parallels to this conversation. This is also meant to be an interactive session. I'm more of a facilitator of conversation and thinking than I am a speaker at people. So I want to keep that going. So if you have a question, please send it to the chat, put up your hand. Elise, if you see a question and I've missed it, please just feel free to jump in. I'm fine with stopping and starting a little bit, as long as we ensure everybody has a chance to share and we get everything out to you in the 1 hour that we have together. So that's how things are going to go. I'm just going to look and see what people wrote about why they're here. And COVID is a catalyst. Got it. Thank you very much, Jessica. It's got all the right C words. Thanks, David. And also the opportunity to learn more about creativity to inspire others. I hope, Lanny, that does this when I start to bring in this climate piece. And curiosity is always a good reason to join a session about creativity. So thank you for all of that. I promised you definitions. Here's my first one. Let me define my definition of creativity. This really emerged, my whole study of creativity, when, as David mentioned, I did a master's in creativity and change leadership in 2006. Before that time, I didn't think that I was very creative. And I think in my first session, sitting in that classroom, I suddenly realized the different dimensions of creativity and how I had been creative for most of my life. I had been engaged in and involved in the output of ideas that are novel, desired, and useful in some shape or form. Of course, this definition of creativity moves it out of the artistic realm of creativity, which I also love. But my work is solely in organizational creativity and nurturing it in people and in their leadership, bringing it forth. Another important definition, because often these 2 words are expressed as the same thing, is innovation. So for me, when I talk about innovation, how I view innovation is actually the scaling or commercialization of a creative idea or output and knowledge into new business models, products, services, and or experiences. The important element here is that creativity is absolutely necessary for innovation, but people can be creative and it doesn't turn into anything that falls into the space of innovation. So there's a connectivity there between the two. And my space falls more into the left, although I often with my clients have an eye on innovation because it's critically mandate important for them also. One more definition for you: collaboration. And in the work I do, collaboration is necessary in creativity and in innovation. And it's just simply the action of working with someone to produce or create something together. And this is an old cartoon, but still kind of funny, and brings me back to my first experience out of business school, fresh consumer packaged goods marketing. And one of the brand managers brought us all together to do the brainstorming session. And, this is about 25 years ago, but it's vivid, like this was yesterday for me. And as he put his question up on the flip chart, as he leaned against it, my first idea came out of my mouth, and his automatic response to me was, well, that's a stupid idea. And even then, fresh out of school, 20-something years old, I knew there was something wrong with that. And of course, fast forward to my studies in creativity, I knew pretty quickly the specific reason why that didn't work. And, one of the sessions earlier on that I heard on day one, they talked about the distinction in creativity between divergent and convergent thinking, and how important it is that the two should not happen at the same time. That's one aspect of what didn't work there. And it wasn't a collaborative way of working. So anyway, that continues to be something of a benchmark for me. And as I transition here, I want to share a model also to ground my conversation with you about climate. So let me walk you through the creative change model. This model comes from the professors I worked with during my master's degree, and speaks to causing change from a creative lens. So in the creative change model, there's a lot of focus on person, and the person, the leader inside of the change model, and how they are a creative human being. Then there is the process that must be intentionally chosen to use, and I like to use human-centered design and Agile, creative problem solving are my sort of go-to processes when I facilitate in this space. And I love using them. However, and importantly, is the environment that the people do their work in and the process that they're using. And this environment, which circles it, is a combination of culture and climate. Again, an important aspect of what we're talking about here with creative change. When all of this is working together, this interaction then leads to products. And those products can include theories, solutions to problems, ideas, services, and inventions. And this is the next change part of this journey, is this adoption of the product then leads to actual creative change. So social change, behavioral change, and innovation. And this, though, must be noted, is an iterative process. It's never one and done. It's nonlinear. And wherever you land in the creative change process, the theory is that these are different spaces that must be fulfilled on and thought about during the change process. I use this as my grounding for this conversation we're going to have today, because as I said in the introduction to my work here in the description of this session, person and process are very important, but they're talked to a lot. And therefore, that's why I wanted to focus with you today around specifically climate in the environment of a creative organization. This quote comes from a day one session from Matt Chatter. He literally said, "Culture's damn hard to change." And I totally agree with him. And sometimes clients come to me, and maybe they come to you and say, Marysia, I want to change our culture. I want it to become a culture of innovation. And yeah, okay. However, we got to start in some different places, because that is hard work and it's going to take a lot longer. And I'm going to explain why that's my view on it, and how actually climate plays a part of this. So although culture and climate are related, culture, as I said, is damn hard to change. So the definition of culture, more definitions for you, are the values, beliefs, history, traditions, reflecting the deeper foundation of the organization. We cue it up as what the organization actually values, what's important. I work with a 130-year-old pharmaceutical company, and we are, in most of our sessions, pressing up against their culture, but it's the required change that they're asking for. So we respect that culture because it got them to who they are today. But then we are slowly working at undoing some of these cultural beliefs to be able to move towards a more innovative organization. And in that, we bring climate into that conversation. And here is what we talk about when we talk about climate. It's the reoccurring patterns of behaviors, attitudes, and feelings that characterize life in the organization. It's what people experience, whether that be in meetings, in remote spaces, in live spaces. And you'll notice climate, just like outside, it can change quickly. So you could be in a meeting and there's a group of leaders that the climate is set and it's really working. And then someone steps into the room, and maybe you've had this too, and suddenly people get tense, their shoulders rise up, something changes, and that affects creativity. So climate is something that leaders impact. So organizational climate also influences the following really important processes: communication, problem solving, decision making. The problem solving part is particularly where my attention is. And then, of course, it will have an effect on outcomes being innovation and the quality of work being done, employee satisfaction, engagement, which is a big conversation now, and whether people are staying or deciding to leave organizations, and then ultimately profitability. So if you were to imagine a tree, the culture are the roots. It's the foundation of the organization around the different aspects that I have already spoken to. And then the climate, or the leaves and the branches, it's what we see on the outside. Very easy analogy here to think about these distinctions inside of this whole space being the environment of the tree. I like climate because, as I've already mentioned, we can really influence it, and leaders especially influence climate of their teams and the organizations that they're working within. In fact, we think there could be a 40 to 80% variance. I realize that's a large variance. However, it does speak to how much leaders can impact the climate inside of an organization, and why I think this needs to be a very important focus if we're really committed to generating creativity inside of the places that we work. So let me take a breath here and open this up to each of you. You can share your reflections in the chat, or you can just turn your mic on and share. I'd love to hear what your reflections are on your work climate, whether it be your client, you go into a client and you feel the work climate, or you've gone into a meeting at a client's, or whether it be where you work or some organization that you're involved in. Would some of you be willing to share what your reflections are on work climate?
Looks like Chris is.
All right, Chris, please.
And he's got all kinds of stuff for you in the chat.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I am an ecologist, so I study climate change and weather, and
Okay.
climate and weather are not the same. So weather are things that happen daily, or, at the hour level, rain, cloud. Climate is more of a global phenomenon. I do like both metaphors for institutional. And in my case at York University in Toronto as well, there's the climate, right, which is about justice, equity, diversity, inclusivity, creativity, managing and being open to different cognitive styles. But making that happen at the finer grain is very challenging. So York may say, we value internationalization of research, but then the impediment of making that dream real reshapes both the weather of how we as researchers toil away and the climate. So earlier, I made a comment on the chat, walk the walk, talk the talk.
Yeah.
So I see that a lot with creativity research, that most institutions value divergent thinking and creativity to some extent, provided it doesn't generate undue friction. So I like that idea because it aligns with my values, climate, culture, or the goals. But I don't like that idea when it doesn't, I can't see a way to do it, or it'll cost me work. So that was one reflection I wanted to share, or two or three, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's really great. And, Of course, as always, we hear people say, well, let's start to generate a space where there's more creativity, and there's lots of talk, but the change part, which is why the creative change model is also important, because it speaks to what, like the turning of the dial of what has to keep happening. And then it's an ongoing journey. It's never done, and it's iterative. And that one thing I didn't say about that change model is that people can engage, you could start talking about product innovation and then realize you've got to go back and think about, well, who's around the table and what process are we using? What's the working environment we're going to have around us to be successful around what we're committed to producing here? So that dynamic is important. And I look at this as an ecosystem for success. So thank you for that comment. Does anyone else want to comment on this? I'm seeing Linda, you've got a comment here. Currently supporting a department with low psychological safety and hence little personal risk taking. Happy that within my own unit we join forces, and if some friction arises, is that Snell could, I don't know that term, interpret things from a positive angle. Linda, if you would turn your mic on, how do you say that? Snalltakalakar?
It's Swedish. Sorry, Marysia.
I love it. I love that.
Means like interpret in a friendly way. Yeah.
Right. Assume good intention.
Exactly. That was
beautiful.
That was a good interest.
Can you say it one more time, please?
Swedish lesson. Okay, number one. Snälltolkar.
Snälltolkar.
Love it.
Oh, yeah, kind of good.
Good. Yeah, it's great. Thank you. I love that you're zooming. Are you in Stockholm?
In Uppsala, actually,
okay.
Close by. Yeah.
Yeah, I love Sweden, so I had the chance to work there. It's a great place to be. All right, well, let me actually now introduce to you, in this context of climate, the 6 creative climate dimensions, and give you a bit of a story. And Linda, it goes back to Sweden, to a researcher and doctor, Goran Ekvall. 1980s, Dr. Ekvall worked in Volvo. And what he noticed when he would go around to different parts of R&D and marketing, et cetera, around Volvo, is the different departments and teams operated differently inside of creative output. And he started to research it and market, and what he landed on were the importance of creative climate dimensions to have creativity emerge. So I got the chance to really study Goran Ekvall's work in my master's, and I kept bringing it forward since I completed that work with my clients, and have found it to be very useful and valuable to bring these distinctions out. I have actually brought in some additional distinctions from my research and my work, and then shifted a little bit of how it gets presented. But I have to acknowledge and call out his work, because it's the foundation of what shaped my thinking in creative climate. So I'm going to share these with you, and I'm going to let you know that we're going to send you to a breakout to have a conversation with a group of people also. So you're forewarned. So just take note of this, and then we're going to drop in a mural board also. So you'll have all these definitions with you to have the conversation. So like was already talked about in terms of psychological safety, trust and openness is a critical climate, whether we're talking about a climate for creativity or any other work climate. It's absolutely fundamental. And this is defined as the emotional safety to be vulnerable, and that authentic behavior is welcome. You can be yourself, you can show up, and people are empathetic towards each other. They're curious about one another, and they are genuinely interested in each other's well-being. There are opportunities to influence decisions in this space, and there's autonomy to choose work. It's actually embraced. So there's an independent factor to this. And with this trust and openness, if we talk about a remote space of working, people trust that when you're remote and you're not in the office, that you're doing the work that it needs to be done. There is also a belief that others are reliable and capable, which falls into that space of working together and being able to collaborate. So trust and openness is a critical creative climate dimension. Then there's idea support. This is where new ideas are nurtured in a constructive and positive way. This is where you're bringing in divergent thinking with idea, brainstorming or other methods to generate ideas, that the feedback at a certain stage is constructive and positive. New ideas can be floated without immediately not being shot down. And there's deferral of judgment so that wild ideas can emerge, diverse thinking, and people can really, swing out almost on skinny branches to share their thinking. And time is actually made to explore and uncover new ideas. Of course, 3M really made this a popular structure for ideation, where they might dedicate up to 10% of someone's work week to get out of their work environment and to be able to get stimulus and work in different areas and bring in new thinking. So idea support is a fundamental cornerstone. Playfulness and humor. Of course, we just had that conversation with the successful meetings with Dr. Joseph Allen, and he talked about humor and fun and playfulness as an important, he didn't call it dimension, but that's what I call it. So in this case, we say fun and laughter can flourish, and that people actually make this happen. So people don't take themselves too seriously and can be lighthearted. And humor can spontaneously emerge in good times and sometimes bad. Playfulness, fun, and ease is actually encouraged. This helps people let their guard down. It helps people be more relaxed and ultimately share some potentially different ideas, maybe crazy ideas, because they know the group is going to have some fun with that and not get shot down. Another very important dimension is celebration and acknowledgement. This is where we actually take time out to actually celebrate wins and success, and they're acknowledged and celebrated with colleagues. And we have now a lot of research that talks about the importance of taking responsibility for where we have success, because often we just focus on what we did wrong, and the human being needs to celebrate and acknowledge and take this time. And this is where small wins are actually seen as an opportunity to boost inner work life, and that people actually see where their work contributes based on this acknowledgement and celebration to the larger purpose at hand. And it can infuse even more meaning into the place of work. I like to also bring an analogy of sport here, where even in, professional hockey, for example, which I don't play on the professional level, but I love to play hockey, but certainly watching the professional athletes, you can have a team in last place. And when they score, they still celebrate. And we as fans love to celebrate with them. It just brings something in all of us. So why not bring more of that in terms of the context of our work? That's what this dimension is highlighting. These dimensions build on one another, you'll see. And then that takes us to this important distinction, which is risk-taking, which we all know is important for creativity and ultimately innovation. But how does that happen? Well, the important words here is uncertainty and ambiguity. There's no risk-taking without uncertainty and ambiguity, but they're actually viewed as necessary and met with patience as opposed to being pushed out of the creative process. The possibility of failure from risk is embraced as an opportunity because people see that they can learn and evolve without fear of reprimand. Of course, the where we fail needs to be structured. So when we're talking about risk-taking, remember the word I used here around intentionality. Intentionality needs to be built into all of these conversations. But with risk-taking, bold new initiatives with unpredictable outcomes can be imagined. And then finally, the last dimension, which has two components to it. First of all, it's embracing debate. And debate can be something easier to generate amongst people. Diverse viewpoints are respected and they're debated. But this next dimension, idea conflict, is an important distinction, and how it gets brought into places of work and collaboration. Because this is where disagreement and heated dialogue can emerge. However, people are not being positional, personal, or political about these ideas. It's very important that that gets parked so that we can just go, Elise and I can just go, I don't agree with that thinking, but I know that Elise is not making a personal derogatory comment about me because we already have a background that has been structured so that we are just in idea conflict and committed to what we think is important to further the work that we're doing together. Of course, with that means we need people to actively listen, reflect, and embrace diverse thinking and ideas. And we can go one step further here with this debate and idea conflict, this is where diversity comes in of experience, background, cultures, regions, to bring those perspectives together in this space to make sure the thinking is robust. So these 6 dimensions are what encapsulate what I call the creative climate dimensions. So I'm going to just pause for a moment because we're going to send you out to your breakout rooms. But before we do that, are there any questions about these 6 dimensions that you have? Anyone got a question or a query about what I just shared? And I know I just shared a lot, and I know I can talk quickly. So I'm also going to give you a chance just to let it seep in before we send you out to some breakout work.
We do have some questions in the chat, Marysia, about
Okay.
maybe you could list the 6 dimensions for the breakouts again.
Yes. Let's go back to the beginning because we can do it so easily. So the 6 dimensions begin with 1, trust and openness. Number 2 is idea support. Number 3 is playfulness and humor. Number 4 is celebration and acknowledgement. Number 5 is risk-taking. And then number 6 is debate and idea conflict. I will let you know that when we send you out to your breakout rooms and you begin your conversation, Elise and I will be popping in to your breakout room to give you a link to a mural board that you will go to that will have these 6 dimensions in it and give you the opportunity to play in that mural board a bit in terms of what I'm going to ask you to do here in reflection in your breakouts. Peter, you said you missed number 2. Can I repeat that one? Do you still need me to do that?
No, thank you. All set. I needed the list and I got it. Much obliged.
Great. Good. Excellent. Good. Anyone have a question about any of the elements of these dimensions?
There was one question. I don't know if we should get into it now before the breakout or maybe after the breakout. Maybe it's more of a technique, keeping the debate to ideas and not people.
Yes. Yes. Well, let's look. I think we've got, based on my timing, I've got a minute before we wanted to send you out to your breakout room. So let's talk about that, actually. And what I will do is I want to just stop share for one moment, and then we'll make sure that this gets put into the chat so that you all have it. So let's just stop the share. And does anyone who had that question, David? I'm just looking in the chat.
I believe that was CJ.
CJ, okay. CJ, do you want to provide any more context to that, or just is that the question?
I had 2, but I can be very brief. I found a paper on ResearchGate, the 10. Is that from the mentor or person you were talking about? Anna.
Is it Gornick-Phil?
Who is it?
Is it Gornick-Phil?
No, Anna Jornstam, Exploring the Creative Climate in an Open Innovation Arena. And she lists 10, and there's a website that lists 10. How did you pick 6 versus 10? And then my second question was the idea versus the person.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so I'm not sure if they're the same, if they came from Gornick-Phil's work. What I found is because of the nature of my facilitating, I found that just using 6 allowed people to engage in dialogue far more richly. So inside of some of those dimensions, you could pull them apart and make them broader, but it's purely for facilitation and learning purposes. I've turned it into those 6, which seem to have worked very well. Secondly, makes sense? Thank you. The second part around idea versus personality conflict is key. And I have heard a lot, and I was just speaking to a client earlier this week, that they're noticing that people are in a full remote environment aren't really challenging each other and don't know how to manage conflict well. And so I think, and I said to him, do you think it's possible that your teams are collapsing when they have conflict of ideas with conflict of personality? So they're stepping back from leaning in or pushing back or even moving into an idea conflict state because it's become collapse with, I'm going to insult you, if I start to push back on your thinking really hard. And so the facilitation hasn't occurred to have those 2 be separated and give people permission to go deeper into that kind of dialogue. So what I have found with this language, this provides a language, which is powerful, and they can start to say, hey, I think we need to go into some idea conflict here. That's what my clients then embrace it as. Or they even pull the card up and start to use them as a way to facilitate themselves to dive into an important conversation.
You have cards?
Yeah, you're going to see them in the mural in a minute. Yeah, now I got physical cards, but they're on the mural board. So how about we send?
Yeah, I
about
think
we
that's
send
a
you
good
out?
teaser.
Yeah, it's a good. I hope I got you excited to go into your board. So we've got, I'm just going to confirm. Let's get what you have to do. You know what I'm going to do? You get out to your breakout rooms. I'm going to screen share to your breakout rooms. And as that's going on, then Elise and I are going to pop into your room with the mural board that will take you to the place you're going to do your work for 12 minutes.
All righty.
right.
You are off and away.
Thank you. Welcome back. Good to have you back. I hope you had some good conversation. Never enough time, I know. However, let's at least start something here together in dialogue. And 2 questions here, and I'm going to ask for some volunteers, please. We've got about 10 minutes, so good amount of time to hear from you. What dimension did your breakout group, or dimensions did your breakout group choose that you see as critical to nurture and stimulate creativity in your current workplace? So you'd have to do a little bit of a diagnostic of how it currently is. And then what positive and negative behaviors impact this dimension do you think in your workplace? So 2 questions. So I am going to stop sharing. And I can pop that into the chat if you want it directionally, but you know, we are in a collaborative and nurturing environment here. So whatever conversation emerged in your room, even if it didn't answer that, I'd love to hear that now. So would one of the groups like to share what conversation emerged around creative climate dimensions in your breakout? Looking for some volunteers to kick this off. CJ, are you going to do it? Oh, yes,
I'm
Peter,
sorry.
Peter, go. I'm just going to, thank you.
There's always like those 5 seconds that go by and it's like, all right, I'll go.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
Group number 3, we had a fantastic discussion. I can't say that we peeled all of them apart in a great way because we focused on trust and openness, and ultimately, and for some really interesting reasons that maybe I'll invite my team members to chime in on, but I think we identified that without trust, in a way, idea support, debate, playful celebration, risk-taking, like if you don't have trust, none of those, it's really hard to actually even engage in any of the others. So that's why I think we focused on trust and openness as being really the critical one there. And
Peter,
yeah.
Did your group, though, identify anything that you see as in whether it be remote or hybrid that's possibly that's affecting that dimension negatively and then positively?
Well, I'll turn it to the yes. I don't know if it has have to do with hybrid. I think it has more to do with gender, and perhaps social and really as your climate certainly and culture, but then really maybe the social culture of where we're from and our geography and so forth might have something to do with that too. So I might ask some folks if anybody from group 3 wanted to check in on that.
Yeah, I'll pop in. Numbers of us have seen, not all of us have seen cases where a person of a certain gender, and I suppose it could go the other way, but my experience was as a woman, speaking up, daring to say things, being largely annoyed, go over there. I go away, man comes in, says the exact same idea, and suddenly he's being, oh, isn't that a great idea? Oh, we should give him more responsibility. That's, it's still happening. I know it happened a few months ago to a friend of mine. She quit her job and suddenly the new guy was like, oh, he's great. Yeah. What?
Yeah, well, let's do a check around who has their Zoom screen on, and in the chat, give us have you seen that happen to somebody else, or have you experienced that yourself? Show of hands or just a hell yeah in the chat. Okay, a lot of hands going up. Yep, I too have had that experience. Thank you for voicing that, Barb. And then climate, what happens to climate, Barb, in that moment?
Oh, all the women get the idea that, well, I risk putting it up, or I've got to work around this somehow. I've got to have a man say my idea for
Yeah.
me, or I need to find an ally who's going to back me up when I
Yeah.
say an idea. We shouldn't have to do that.
Yeah. And so then the intentional, how do we stop that? Back to CJ's, how do we walk the talk if we really want that, becomes a broad conversation around that dimension. Thank you. Room 1, 2, or 4. Can we hear from you, please? So anyone else? Can we hear from some of your conversations? AJ, when I went into your room, there was a lot of dialogue going on. Can I tap you on the shoulder? Do you mind if I do that?
Sure thing. Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah, we discussed the topic number 4, which was the how to separate the idea from the person, and how do you what are some of the challenges you might feel. We didn't get through the discussion all the way. We ran out of time, but basically, how do you respond in the moment, and how do you stay away from responding back and in response to a perceived attack or a perceived slight. And so what are some strategies around that? And we talked about Lex Friedman, and one of his strategies is taking the argument of the opposing side and making a stronger argument on their behalf as one of the strategies to help with that.
Great, thank you. And anyone else from your room, do you want to share any other strategies or anything else that emerged? Because that is a big one, and that one.
It's a technical term for it.
Yeah, it emerges a lot as the one that needs the most attention and intentionality to have emerge, and to do it effectively when collaborating and working in creative teams. Got time for a couple more comments. So the other breakout rooms. Barrett, thank you.
I'm happy. I'm always happy. I've been resisting the temptation to speak up. But one of the things that we chatted a little bit about, a number of the different possibilities, but I'll speak for myself at least. I'm struck by the fact of how contextually dependent each of these are. I see them as lenses, or see them as facets that are really important to explore, each one of them, but that the answers are going to be different in virtually every context that you experience them. And so I take the point about how vital trust is, but trust may or may not be where you need to begin. Depending on the particular group and situation that you're in. Not only that, but what these things look like are culturally dependent, So in some cultures, just to give you an example, if you're looking somebody in the eye, it's considered, that's considered really offensive. You'd be looking to the ground if you're talking to them, In some cultures, it's really offensive to tell somebody directly what you've experienced. It would be more appropriate to talk to somebody else who was trusted within the context to share your concern with them. And so these things, so I ended up putting up the, what I call 4 simple rules of inquiry. They come from Glenda Oyoung and HSD, but I find those to be really powerful sort of ways of being curious to come into a situation around all of these concerns. I mean, even your point about celebration, I was just, when you shared that, I was thinking, yes, how important it is to celebrate, but how culturally how culturally contingent that is. What one person experiences as affirming and celebratory, another person experiences as embarrassing and shaming. And it could be the very same thing. And so being curious about that and figuring out, how do we celebrate?
Yeah. I think those are really important points. And what I tend to use when I use these, and I like it virtually through a mural board where teams can move them around. And I often give, by the way, each team member a deck so they can share their experience of the climate in their team. And then they just have dialogue, right, Barrett, so that they all come from the same context, which is their team or how they're working in a work group in an innovation session. And it's just open dialogue, that it's meant to be a safe space in that moment where they get to share. And it's just meant as a jumping off point, as opposed to something linear again, or over structured, because you're so right about what you're sharing. Any final comments or from any of the other rooms? CJ, you were having a pretty rich conversation in your breakout room. Do you want to share anything that emerged?
Yeah, we tackled debate. I've been to a few meetings recently where right up front, the ground rule was Chatham House rule, which opened up a lot of opportunity, that all ideas were on the table. Anyone could say it, no matter how divergent, weird, and wacky, but you didn't have to own it. So that non-permanence and non-ownership was really positive. And then the other thing we talked about were generational differences and social media effects. That's my dog. Sorry. That's it. Thanks.
All dogs welcome. Yeah. Yeah. And, I think, CJ, just to circle this and bring this to a close, the important part here is integrity, is that people do what they say. So that part is important. So if we say we're going to have idea time and we're going to start to work that into our climate, if you say you're going to do it and then you don't do it, it's almost worse that you said it in the first place. And I know you all have your own examples of how that can look, but that's a big part of it. So absolutely. Well, one thing I would request that you do now in sort of a moment of debrief here, if you would, possibly in the chat, just fill it up with one key concept or one key idea from my working session with you that you're going to take away. I'd love to see what that is, what struck you, what maybe you'll continue to research. I will drop my deck out to the team, so it will be available to you also. And if you haven't seen it yet, there's a research paper in there that I did with a colleague of mine about 2 years ago about the surprising impact the pandemic had on creativity. And we framed that research up as what emerged positively and then some drawbacks of the way we were working. And we didn't come out with a winner. And there was a lot of interesting things there in terms of practices to take forward and ways to keep nurturing the positive impact that the pandemic and remote work had on creativity. So please, if there's something in there you'd like to talk about further, don't hesitate to reach out. And with that, I think I can send it back out to our great facilitation and at least to the team to bring us in on time.
Yeah, fantastic. Well done. Well done.